to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we're going to be covering the Miami Hurricanes, particularly the path for them to possibly win a national championship, as well as their hopes of reaching the ACC championship. And on today's episode, got a special guest here, Michael McGruder, lifelong Miami fan. He's been covering them extensively, and I'm really excited to have you on the show and talk some Miami football.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm excited to talk about a topic I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. And a lot of people have been watching Miami this year. They were incredibly hyped throughout the preseason, as well as now, off to one of the best starts that we've seen in a while. 7-0 right now. You have Cam Ward, who is certainly a Heisman Trophy candidate. They've played a bunch of close games this year. 18 out of their past 25 games have been decided by one score. And this Miami offense has been electrifying to watch and really, quite frankly, entertaining. I mean, you can think about, week one versus Florida. You can think about the nail biter that they had versus UCal. And you can also think about that back and forth against a really strong Louisville team too, who, quite frankly, doesn't get a lot of credit. So with that said, you've been following throughout the year. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen from 2023 Miami to now, and how do you think those changes are ultimately going to lead Miami to being able to make a run at this national title?
I mean, I think the biggest change is obvious in having Cam Ward on your team. He has injected a level of class and quality to the offense that had been lacking under previous quarterbacks. You said that they're off to a 7-0 start, and that's their best start since 2017. And it has gone very similarly to that. They played a lot of close games throughout. The next part of their schedule, it eases up a little bit, but I wouldn't put any of the teams. Florida State's a rivalry game. Duke has Manny Diaz. You think his players aren't going to want to play hard for him against his former employer? Georgia Tech is always a dangerous team. So you got 3 more games ahead of you that will make it it'll make a very difficult path to the the ACC championship game, first of all. But I mean, even dropping 2 of those games will make it you have to be the conference championship to make the playoff. So Cam Ward has given Miami fans and the players in the team a lot of belief in themselves that if he gets the ball last, he's going to score. And right now we don't really have any evidence against that.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been, he's been great throughout all the stops. He started FCS with Incarnate Word, spent 2 seasons at Washington State. And it's so fitting that this pinnacle moment for him is for a team like Miami, who has had, success, I think of the early 2000s Miami, or even if you want to go way back, I think of 1983 when Bernie Kosar led them to a national championship as well. And moving forward here, I'm just going to briefly just talk about their schedule as well. So you mentioned Florida State, then they have Duke, who knocked off Clemson last year when they had Riley Leonard, who right now is pretty solid at Notre Dame. Then you have a tough Georgia Tech team who's well coached, plays solid defense, and can knock off anybody in the ACC. And then you finish off with Wake Forest and Syracuse after that. And with that schedule, I mean, there definitely is a clear path for them to make a serious run and go 12-0. So with that said, right now at the moment you have the top contenders of being mainly Miami, Clemson, Pitt, and SMU. So with that said, do you think it's absolutely necessary for them to go undefeated this season, or do you think there's a little leadway for them to possibly go 11-1 and still make a playoff and maybe get one of the last bids?
I certainly think at 11-1, there's an opportunity there, whether that loss comes in the ACC championship game or in the season. But regardless, it needs to be a 1-loss opportunity. It's going to be tough based on their schedule and their performance. Everyone likes a good blowout game for your playoff team. You want them to be the most dominant teams. And frankly, it's not always that way. If you go back and look at Auburn when they won the national championship with Cam Newton,
yeah.
They were winning close games every week. And it just goes to show you, if you can win close games, it's going to matter come important game time. But it certainly does come down to maximizing your opportunity right now. You have a very senior team. These guys are all ready to put the U back on the map. And hey, college football is more fun when people don't like Miami. It's just like you said, think of the 70s, 80s, 2000s. A bunch of bad boys running around dancing and celebrating. People hated them, but they were good and they could do that. So it very much matters to win and to win convincingly. People always construe the AP poll and the college football playoff, and they're not necessarily the same group of people. They'll reward schedules and games differently than the AP does. But I still think it matters because they're not playing the other 3 teams you listed in the regular season. Their best game is Louisville, who was a preseason ranked team. And they played them tough and good, but without another notable signature win in their regular season, it's going to be very tough to get in with 2 losses.
Yeah, because, that is kind of a pro for Miami in a sense of like, okay, you avoided Clemson, you avoided SMU and, all those teams too. But as long as they can kind of ride the ship and Cam Ward continues to play the way he's going now. And, also, I'm sure you were going to mention this too, but I think Damian Martinez also deserves a lot of credit too, because yes, Cam Ward is on pace to throw for 4,000 yards. He has 24 touchdowns this year, QBR 92.6, which is number 1 in the country too. But this all wouldn't have happened without, having those sort of moments where you have him as a complimentary back, and certainly has a lot of weapons this year too.
Yes, the running game, it's a spread offense, but the running game between Damian Martinez and the rest of the group has really improved based on mostly the offensive line. Mario Cristobal is an offensive line guy. He likes to win in the trenches. And so he recruited guys like Maui Noah and Javion Cohen, and the rest of the line is a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys that are. Samson Okunla was a 5-star top 10 prospect 2 years ago. He's got all these guys that are now just out there and pushing people around. Makes a difference. You look like at Cam Ward when he's back there and he's not rushed. Then he starts running. He's very nonchalant in his run too. It's fun to watch a guy almost say this is too easy. But the running game has certainly helped make his life easy when he's both passing or chooses to pull it and run. But teams are having to respect that Damian Martinez is 235 pounds?
Yeah.
You don't want to get in the way of that coming through the middle at you.
Yeah, and when you have a running back like that who can break tackles and do all those things, it leads to the play action, and it also makes you respect Cam Ward, going
the
outside the pocket
too.
and finding all those reads too.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Mario Cristobal. Of course, we were gonna briefly mention him, and everybody knows about his past at Oregon, and it just feels really fitting that he has a hometown welcome. And everything's kind of coming together. So from a Miami fan perspective, like what's the general feeling about Mario Cristobal, and what's the general feeling about Mario Cristobal right now compared to 2023?
When he announced he was coming back, it was unbelievable. We loved Manny Diaz for the turnover chain and some of the swag he brought back to the U and making us a conversation topic again. But when Mario Cristobal announced he was coming back, it was a homecoming. All right, here's a Miami guy. He coached on the 2001 team. He played. He won 2 national championships. This guy knows Miami football. He knows the path to success is going from Daytona Beach to Orlando, and everything south. It needs to be a Miami prospect. And so that's where we've noticed a big change is the recruiting trail. I believe they were the number 16 class in 2022. Biggest contributor out of there, Wesley Basanth, starting linebacker. And then number 7 in 2023, and then number 4 last year. And so it has made a huge difference bringing in a new level of talent. Now, he's always going to be criticized for his game management at Oregon. And we saw some of that in last year. Everyone can talk about Georgia Tech. Talk about a stab.
You said it.
I dropped to the ground. I couldn't believe it happened. What do you mean we don't kneel the ball? And this year he has handled tight games because Miami's played a lot of them very well. In the Cal game, you had the questionable call for targeting, but Miami still had 3 timeouts left. So they could still kill the clock and get the ball back. And again, Cam Ward with the ball is a dangerous thing if he's touching it last. By the way, just to delve on that topic, that targeting, They punt and pinned him at the 8. It's not the targeting call that allowed a 77-yard catch on the next play.
Yeah, because that's finding that balance too. Because the ACC clearly has had some, let's say, blunders in terms of officiating too. But at the same time, you have to find that balance too. Because I think a lot of kind of general fans like to kind of pinpoint that one call in the game that ultimately cost them, or that one field goal that could have happened. But you don't think about the other, three penalties, or
Yeah.
the guy who got injured, or whatever you want to fill in the blank too.
Look, there's no way the ACC could be competent enough to run a conspiracy.
Yeah, I don't know about Jim Phillips doing all that. So
it would never happen.
yeah, and we talked about obviously their offense with Cam Ward and Damian Martinez, but I think obviously one of the big storylines for Miami, in terms of getting the national championship and winning an ACC championship, presumably versus Clemson, is their defense. I mean, they've definitely have had their moments of struggling this year, particularly in the secondary. So with that said, what have you seen from this Miami defense as a whole, and what adjustments do you think Cristobal and their defensive staff needs to make in order to get them rolling again?
Well, they brought in a new defensive coordinator this year, Lance Guidry, and that was supposed to help. There wasn't really much room to go down after last year either. The run defense has certainly stepped up a large amount this year. I believe they're 13th in the country in run defense. But like you said, the secondary has been problematic. They are allowing, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's pretty high QBR on quick routes. Here's the most telling stat about the Hurricane defense, though. They rank last in the ACC and are 125th in the country at allowing 50-plus yard plays. They've allowed 7 of them. 4 in the Cal game alone. It's what has allowed the last 3 games, Virginia Tech, Cal, and Louisville, to stay close games. So it feels like a very bend-don't-break defense where they can shut guys down for a period of time, and then all of a sudden it takes one big play and boom, 7-7 game. Yeah. So that's where really Miami has struggled, is limiting the big play, because they've recruited well on that area. You have guys like Ruben Bain, and Tyler Barron was a transfer in this year, and he's leading sack getter. It's been very much stopping big plays once the ball gets to the outside, and it's easy as a fan to watch and be like, why aren't they stopping that? Football's a hard game, and they run a quick screen to the outside, and they've got 3-on-2 blockers. It's going to be a big play. So it's just really comes down to, in my eyes, trying to just prepare for and limit mental mistakes. That's where I really feel like a lot of things come from, is mentally not being aware of the situation and what could happen.
Yeah, because I mean, you mentioned it a couple moments ago about the Virginia Tech game and the UCal game, for example. Because even in my watchings of the ACC this year, UCal's strength in general is a really strong secondary,
mm-hmm.
and they're not necessarily known for their offense too. But when you have those big explosive plays, and you just kind of have to ask yourself, how many more moments are you going to get with Cam Ward kind of having a almost a Cinderella moment? It's not saying
mm-hmm.
that we're not necessarily surprised that he's doing that, but it's kind of finding that balance between where are we going to see a game where obviously we saw it with Florida, but maybe the Duke game, for example, is the moment where because the thing about Duke is they're a well coached team, and they're disciplined. They really don't make too many mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look at this schedule, to me, that game, and particularly Georgia Tech on the road, is going to be the two games that's most telling in terms of can we really see a true complete game from Miami where we where their secondary eliminates those big plays, and maybe we even get into the quarterback a little bit more too.
Yeah, it's the games you don't expect to be tough games are usually your toughest games.
Yeah, and with that said too, I mean, we're they have the weapons, they have the secondary core, and the last question I'm going to have to ask you here is, we saw that Miami is 7-0. They're off to a great start, and we've talked about all that. What exactly do you think is going to be the biggest challenge in terms of the biggest hurdle for him? Do you think it's going to be the defense? Do you think it could be, Cam Ward being sustainable, or do you see, any of these teams possibly being a blunder too, or maybe even Clemson being the ones to possibly upset Miami right now?
Oh, Clemson's always big brother in the ACC until someone else knocks him off. Miami beat him last year, and it felt like vindication. And that was a very down Clemson team. My biggest fear for this season is the obvious. Is Cam Ward going to stay healthy? Right now, he's, like you said, leading the country in passing touchdowns and yards. He's second on PFF between Army's quarterback Bryson Daly and Navy's Blake Horvath. That's a unique top three, let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
They're both throwing the ball now. Who saw that coming? So he's doing a good job of spreading the ball out and making sure everyone. Xavier Restrepo is 8th in the country in yards and 17th in touchdowns. 4 receivers have 24 catches, and 8 different receivers have touchdowns. So he's making sure everyone's involved. It's as he goes, Miami goes. He can't have a bad game because he's bailed the defense out of their bad games. So it'd be great if he's having a bad game, if the defense could step it up, and we'll see. To a lesser extent, I'm not going to put him in the same category just yet, but it reminds me of 2019 LSU, where they relied on Joe Burrow to put up points for them, and the defense could get it done when push came to shove. And so can Miami's offense be that good, that elite? I don't think it's quite there yet, but in comparison to your last 3 Heisman winners, Cam Ward through 7 games has more passing yards. He's got more touchdowns, and he's got more completions of 20-plus yards. So he's also pushing the ball downfield. I think, like we talked about, that opens things up to run underneath and run the ball. It takes people out of the box to have to cover him throwing the ball. On third down, you always feel like Miami's going to convert it. And so it'll be very interesting to see how teams respond now that they've got 7 games of Miami Cam Ward. How do they try to contain him? And how do they adjust? Like you said, it's Mario Cristobal. How can he manage games to make sure Miami has a chance?
Yeah, and even too, I mean, I'm sure you've heard from a lot of other, sports media people how, Cam Ward is essentially arguably the greatest Miami quarterback to have been there. But, right now you
that's
think
a tough room.
Yeah, I know. I think of Vinny Testaverde, I think of Jim Kelly, Craig Erickson, Ken Dorsey, Bernie Kosar. So there's a lot of pressure on him, to say the least. And I think, just like you articulated there, this is definitely his moment, and we're definitely all pretty excited to see what kind of adjustments these defenses are going to make. And
I mean, on that 4th down against Virginia Tech, where his receiver falls to the ground, and he said, as he was throwing it, it's happened before. I'm just got to try to give him a chance. And then 3rd down a couple plays later, and he's being dragged to the ground, and he throws a chest pass like a basketball to his tight end. He's had his Heisman moments, but can he keep winning enough to be an individual accolade like that?
Yeah, and he's been so much fun to watch this year, especially his interviews too. Like, it just seems like he's just so calm, nonchalant, and relaxed. And I think a lot of when you talk about NIL and all that stuff, I think everybody kind of forgets that, hey, 1.6% of these players are like, this is it for them. So I always like it when players have a little bit of fun, relax a little bit, and
I mean,
hopefully that comes out and leads them to a national title.
Yeah, you go back and watch his first run against Florida, and I was like, he's not even running; he's just jogging to the sideline, like he knows he's got it. And, this is what competent quarterback play looks like. Oh my heavens!
Exactly, and we're definitely at the point now where we're halfway into the season, and I'm definitely excited to see where this moves forward. But Michael, I appreciate you being generous with your time and being on the show, and giving our viewers a little taste of Miami, and we'll see what happens throughout the season.
Of course, if I can just say one more thing, no,
Yeah.
I don't think Miami is expected to win the national championship. I don't think they're that good, but you know what? We're having fun.
Yeah, and even too, there's just so many variables in terms of who they get in that first round, if presumably they win the ACC championship, or if it's an at-large bid where they maybe have to play. Ideally, maybe you play the winner of the Big 12 championship or the SEC championships. There's so many different. It's just hard to speculate right now, but let's hope that they don't have another Florida State blunder and forego a team that clearly should be in.
Exactly. Look, I'd much rather play Boise State than Oregon right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ashton Gentry's a dog, but at the same time, they are a beatable team too.
Miami's got a good run defense. If they can't throw the ball, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
Tell you what.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, and it was great having you on.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thanks a lot for having me on. It was a lot of fun.